particularly in India, there's a dream shown to people that going abroad is a fantasy land. And what the dream is shown, it ends at your university. Like the exact average given on the website is, I think, 54,000 euros, but it could be 54 to 60,000. I remember I had this friend who got a scholarship, but the terms of the scholarship were that after you're done with your education, you'll have to come back to India.
Oh.
So if that doesn't align with your
long-term objectives,
then just be careful with that.
Hi Arman, a very warm welcome to the podcast. How are you doing?
I'm doing very well, Kripal. Thank you so much for having me. And how are you?
I'm also trying to pull along. It's excruciatingly difficult in the summer season.
I can understand. It's unimaginably hard.
So you're currently, residing in India, right? You're having your break this thing in semesters.
I'm near my break. So our semester ends in April. So from April to September, there's a break. So I'm here for about a month and a half for that. Then I'll go back.
That's a break of, I don't know, that's a break of May, June, July, August. That's a break of 4 months.
It's actually a little bit more than 4 months, because depending on your specialization, you can end up early and finish earlier than other people. So you can have a 5-month break as well.
Oh, that's a very long amount of break. And in that break, you also have to, mandatorily complete your summer internship as well?
Yes. So with ESCP, with MIM degree, it's mandatory that you have a professional experience before you graduate, and that professional experience has to be an internship. So it's okay if you have done previous internship before you got into ESCP, but that can be only validated up to 20 weeks. And in total, it's mandatory that you do at least 36 weeks. So you can either do it in the summer break, which is 5 months. That's why it's so long. Or else you can take a gap semester, which I'm doing currently, that I'll be starting an internship in July. And that's a 6-month long internship. So I'll be taking a gap semester. And that's a good thing about EACP, that allows you that flexibility that you can take a gap at the end of any semester you like. And you can extend your degree up to, like, you can finish in 4 or 5 years. Not that I'm saying you have to, but that flexibility is an option.
Wow. You mentioned that there is a requirement of you having to complete 36 weeks of internship. So when you, undergo 6 months of internship, that's 24 weeks. What about the remaining 2 weeks?
So either you can, if you have previous experience, you can get that validated, or else find another internship. So you can take a gap year completely. So 2 semesters you take a gap, you work. And there's also a program called apprenticeship program, which is, I know it's there in France, but I think it's there in other European countries as well, where you work with a company while you study, and your tuition fees of your final year, or if you're starting it in the first year, it's reimbursed to you if you have paid it already, or you don't have to pay it. And on the top of that, you get a stipend. So that's an option which is quite competitive. And depending on the country, if you're in France, you probably need to know French. If you're in Germany, you probably need to know German. But that's also another option, that if you don't want to take a gap as such and you want to work while you study, there were a lot of working students when I was there. So that's actually a great option as well.
So is it more like a live project that the institution helps you with? Or is it based on the market itself?
It's not exactly a live project that the institution helps. You actually work with them as an employee. So it's not just a single project. You work with them like a normal employee.
And does the institution help you land the apprenticeship?
So there's a portal called Job Teaser. It's not owned by EACP. EACP is in partnership with Job Teaser, and they help you with, they provide you training for, if you want to get into consulting, there are case coaches. If you want to get into finance, there's finance training. And there's a career center where, if you want to get your CV improved, if you want to practice your interview, all those things are provided. And there are some, so if it's a top tier school, a lot of companies have exclusive partnerships with the university, or they might have exclusive partnership with Job Teaser, where they would post the first job posting on the portal itself. So that sort of gives an advantage to the students in these universities, that they can sort of be ahead of the competition in that way.
Makes sense. It equips you with the resources and also allows you to have the first advantage with the opportunities.
Exactly.
Yeah.
So it's not that for all the jobs, but for instance,
a few of them.
Yeah, a few of them. Like if you go, like on job portal, there's also one very interesting thing which I saw, that there's this section called insights. So I looked at it, and it's insights by students who have worked in that company or in that specific role, and they could be anonymous if they choose to, or they can provide the contact details where they mention what the experience was like,
Wow.
and how can you, like, they also write like what can you do to increase your chances to get selected.
Getting into
That was also very interesting. Otherwise, you probably have to find somebody on LinkedIn, message them.
reach out to
Reach-
them, all the
Exactly,
process of networking and all of that.
exactly. So this also makes it interesting because there are like hundreds of insights, which is actually quite good.
It adds a level of transparency to the system, of course, at the
Exactly.
end of the day. And apart from that, if we talk of your journey exclusively, all the way from the boulevards of Delhi, trying to make music on your own, to making it to Paris in Europe, how did it all come about? How did you have that clarity that yes, I'm supposed to be doing an MIM from Paris, not limit myself to an MBA in India?
So initially, after, not after, but when I was still in undergrad, I wanted to do an MBA because that's what everybody has heard of. That normally you do MBA in India,
Yep.
and that's what I wanted to do as well. And I talked to some consultants, and they said, no, you can't do MBA abroad unless you have at least 3 to 4 years of experience. And I wasn't willing to listen to that. No, I don't want to wait for that long. So they told me about MIM, and they actually told me that like MIM have similar salaries as undergrads, and it's not that competitive. But once I got there, I realized that it's not actually true what they say. That it actually depends on your master's and where you're doing it from, mostly. But for instance, I know a person who was offered a job for 10,000 euros, and when they got to know that she's doing an MIM, that salary got boosted to 37,000.
That's a good increase.
Yeah, so it's not that, so that's like a myth in probably in the consultancy
So
market.
MIM is not a limiting factor, it's an additive factor. That's what you're trying to imply.
Yes. But I would say that the reputation of the school matters a lot. So if anybody is going from India, especially, I wouldn't say for anybody outside of India, because then like we are weaker passports, so we need to keep that in mind as well. That unless you're going probably in the top 5 schools of that nation, of whatever nation you're going to, then if you're going outside of top 5, you're gonna have problem finding a job. It's still possible, but it's going to be harder. But I think the brand name, like similar to India, the brand name of the school matter a lot.
Makes sense, makes sense.
But
And
MIM in itself is not something which holds you back. It's actually additive.
I see, I see. And talking of the weak passport of India, if there's one thing that most of the viewers should know is that me and Arman have been friends for the last 3 years. Your
Yeah.
parents were really determined to make the Indian passport really strong by getting you into the Indian administrative services. They were really after you and the UPSC dream. How did you manage that phase?
So for me, it was actually Indian Foreign Services, not
Exactly.
not
I
the
mean,
IS.
yeah, 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 yeah.
Yeah. And actually, even I was aligned to that goal for quite a while. I knew since I was a child that I wanted to go abroad for some time. Like, doesn't have to be permanent. I knew it doesn't have to be permanent, but it had to be for some time. Like as a child, I would imagine going into the UN. Then as I grew up, it turned to IFS. But then I realized that if somebody is getting into civil services, it should be a pure intention. It shouldn't be, or that there's a status attached to it, there's a privilege attached to it. It's as I The intention should be pure, and for that you want to serve your nation, you want to serve the people, and for that you need to be very very selfless. For me, I wanted to some I would rather say I was more individualistic, that I wanted to experience life in the way I wanted to, and experience more things which would probably not, like, my path would have been different if I would have went into UPSC. And that ways my parents were also supportive, that they would encourage me to do that, but they would never force me. That was also
Wow.
important.
That's a fine
And
line. Yeah.
yeah, that's a fine line. Like they would be happy to see me get into that, but they wouldn't be disappointed if I didn't go into that. And because even I was honest that, like, I didn't have that intention of being that selfless, that I would not because you don't live your life that much when you get into civil services. That's what I saw when I saw my parents and I've seen other people. Your intention should be pure.
A comprehensive assessment of yourself and the fact that you don't align with the objective of collectivism and rely on your own idiosyncrasies. That is what allowed you to get that clarity. Right, Arman?
A part of partly like there's a sense of collectiveness in me that in like if I'm in a team, in sort of a team, I'm a team person. It's not that I'm individualistic in work, but my I would say my life trajectory, I
Yeah, yeah.
wanted to shape it in the way I wanted to. If I would have gotten the foreign services, it would be stuck to that.
Mm.
Once into that, you can't get outside of that.
Mm.
For me, I was somebody who wanted to experience different cultures and have the flexibility that if I want to come back to India, I can come back to India. If I want to choose a country, if I want to move to Singapore, I move to Singapore. If I want to move to Algeria, I move to Algeria. Like whatever I wanted, I
Wow.
wanted to have that flexibility.
That's a good way of looking at things. And about the clarity of choosing your B school. How did you
Hmm.
arrive at that position where, yeah, I'm supposed to be doing an MIM from abroad, not limit myself to an MBA in India? How did you arrive at that clarity?
So after I realized that it's actually true that you can't do an MBA unless you have a 4 year experience. So I consider MIM as an option. And there's a YouTuber named, his name is Meng Sehgal. I actually saw his YouTube for GMAT videos, and because I was going through the ISB YLP, and I had to get the GMAT for that, but that didn't really happen. But through him, I discovered because he was a student at HECV Paris and doing MIM. He used to upload videos about MIM, and through him, I actually got the first-hand experience what the course is actually like, what the life is actually like, and then I started doing my own research, and I got to know okay these are the best programs in the world, and then I was trying to think of a more long-term perspective that okay if I want to go abroad, I want to at least work there. I don't want my chances to be cut that if I finish the education, I have to come back. So for me, so there were options like US, Canada, UK, all the English speaking countries. But the problem is there's a lot of competition already over there. And if you talk about the US, the MIM isn't really valued over there in North America. In Europe, however, it's still valued because it was originated in Europe. And a lot of Europeans actually do like the ones who choose to do masters, they go for the MIM program, and so it's valued over there. And if I talked about the UK, there's a lot of competition, and the British economy isn't doing particularly well as well right now. So given that, then I shortlisted like, okay, France is good, Germany is good, and then I saw that okay, India has pretty good relationships with France now, and it's getting better. Like even when Emmanuel Macron came, he said, okay,
Macron
we
came
want
here. This thing.
30,000 Indian students coming into France. So
Yeah,
I
yeah.
thought, okay, this is a pretty good opportunity. And when I was doing my application process, I only applied to 3 schools. It was HEC, ESSEC, and ESCP. For me, like getting into any of these 3 schools would be like, okay, I'm good with this because each of them has something unique in them, which basically adds to your skills. With HEC, it's basically elitist. It's pretty much the Harvard of Europe on that term. ESSEC and ESCP are basically on par. Like ESSEC has a really solid curriculum. With ESCP, it's very international and it's very flexible. You get professors of different countries and students of so many different countries. You learn how things work in different countries. So that's what okay. That I found all that very interesting. I started my application, but application process is also quite long. That you start like a year before you're going to actually go into the university. You give your GMAT, you give your SOPs, you find your letter of recommendations. Then, if you get lucky and you get into the second round, then there's the interview round. Then you have to wait patiently to know whether you got in or you didn't get in. So once I got in, I applied in the first round for everything because I knew, okay, first round, if I get in, good. If I don't get in, then it's not for me.
Whoa, whoa. And talking of the factors that you took into consideration while shortlisting colleges, that was a very comprehensive assessment. That what is the visa procedure, what are the kind of relations, the diplomatic relations that the country is
Yeah.
sharing with you, and the most appalling of them all, the state of the economy. That is
Yeah.
one factor that most of the people overlook when they're deciding on their college. So yeah.
Yeah.
So and
I'd
yeah,
say, yeah.
then you
So
were saying.
I think it's particularly in India, there's a dream shown to people that going abroad is a fantasy land. And what the dream is shown, it ends at your university life. That, oh, you're gonna have so much fun in your university, there's so much to do and all that. But like every dream, it's not grounded in reality. You see one factor, but you ignore the 100 other factors which are there. So it's more like running towards that dream without saying, are you sure that's the correct direction to run it? Because maybe it's the other direction which lands up in your dream, but through another path. So, like for me, like definitely life would have been easier in an English speaking country. But then I knew that it's just one aspect of it, and the other aspect is actually surviving there.
Mm.
Because you like in 24 hours, how many hours are you gonna have fun? Okay, let's extend that to a week. Let's extend that to a month. Let's extend that to a year. So you need to have certain sense of reality check, certain reality check in your thought process.
Allow your dreams to be on ground. That's what you're trying to imply
Yeah,
in retrospect. Yeah.
I, I think if you want to run towards your dream, you need to think properly first. Otherwise, you're not going to be there.
And you need to have different approaches on hand as well.
Yeah,
There's no
yeah,
one cutout approach. Yeah. And building upon that as well, you mentioned that there was this, what do you call, very stringent round of application that you had to go through, and that too in a year in advance. So, can you run me
yeah.
through a little bit about how the applications came about and what you took in mind and who did you take guidance from?
Okay, sure. So for me, I actually went through a consultancy, which I don't know if I should name or not because it wasn't
There'll be
the
free marketing from them.
it would actually be negative marketing for them
Why?
because
Oh, I get it now. I get it. Now it'll get interesting.
the consultant which I had, so I had two different consultants. First one left the job or something happened. The other one was didn't really she wouldn't reply to my texts and she like if for example one time I asked her, so consultants make this list of your dream university, the realistic universities and the safe universities. So I asked to make it for France, and in that list there were universities from Germany. So I'm like, it was a mixed list. So I asked, like, oh no, what are you doing? She's like, oh sorry. So that was the amount of attention they paid. And if I wanted help with, for example, I submitted my statement of purpose. I had to submit that, and they said they'd provide assistance with that, and they'd edit it. I got the edited version after the applications were closed. I had submitted on my own, so there was a big delay in what they promised. So it wasn't. It was basically I didn't use anything from them, basically, because everything they did was very late or they were mostly unresponsive. And it's actually I talked to other students in the program as well who are Indian, and these are big names. These consultancies are big names, and even they had a very similar experience.
And how much were they charging you upfront, the consultancies?
A lot. So it could range from anywhere from 8,000 rupees to 80,000 rupees, depending on the kind of package you're going for. If you go for a package like, oh, we guarantee you an admission, that probably go for lakhs as well.
Whoa. And despite that, they were so indolent that they couldn't even come up with befitting less. Whoa, man.
Exactly, exactly.
That's
So like and they would also give wrong, I wouldn't say advice, but the wrong steps to take. For instance, I was told that IELTS is compulsory, but and I was insistent that I'm pretty sure it's not. But they were insisting, no, you have to do it urgently, pay the thing because I would have to do it like in like next 2 days. Then I talked to the university and they were like, no, it's not necessary. So I would have paid a lot more money again to give IELTS an emergency. So that was the wrong guidance as well.
advice from them.
For me, the experience hasn't been great with consultancies. So like if anybody wants to go through a consultancy, I would say uh, first find people on LinkedIn and ask them what they did. And I'm pretty sure that if you want to get into a dream university of yours, these consultants are not going to be able to help you in the way you think. It's basically the universities want to see a unique thought process. Whatever these consultants tell you are mostly they have a pre-made template. Which
Standardized procedure.
yeah. They just hand that out, and that's it. Like some consultancies have consultants who are actually studying in abroad, so they are pretty okay. But otherwise, I wouldn't say it's the best to spend that much money and time over there, because in my case I was frustrated that I wasn't getting things on time. I was getting wrong advice, so it's actually, instead of taking you forward, it can take you back.
So, to all the viewers who are watching this podcast, this is one very fundamental and solid takeaway that you shouldn't be relying on consultancies alone and come up with your own ways of action. So,
Yeah,
apart
yeah,
from so apart from that, Arman, when you talked of filling your form on your own, so
yeah.
what is it all about? Like ESCP releases a form. There is a very distinct procedure to CAT. You give one examination, you're done. Interview calls are coming in, you're sitting in the hotels, and that's it. What about ESCP? How does it all
So
happen?
ESCP was that you go on their portal, and it's not, but ESCP wasn't a typical SOP where you write an entire document. They had different questions. So, for example, if I remember correctly, one question was, it was very interesting, was what do you think about responsibilities? And what sort of international exposure do you have? There were different questions like that. And you would probably write them in, you might write them in your SAP, but it also gives you a path to think about. And it's actually quite interesting to think of it in different, like you wouldn't probably think of writing about responsibility in your SAP. So there were questions like this. You also had to get your letter of recommendation, which was an other headache, because I wouldn't name, I had two professors, and both of
Are they
them.
from a UG college?
Yeah. So it was such a struggle for me that, one time for an other business school, I wanted that, because normally the professor has to send through their email the letter of recommendation directly to the
A
university.
university. Yeah.
Yep. So there was one time, um, I had to fake basically showing the applications are closed and send that to the professors that, okay, the applications are closed. I need to send them in emergency. I've requested them. And only after that, I got the letter of recommendation.
OMG.
I was
You and
such,
its lethargy.
it was it was a very difficult thing, because it wasn't something in my hand. Like I
Exactly.
had to run to the college, and I would run to the college and find out, okay, they're not there. Then call them, they're not picking up. So I mean that's on me as well, that I chose the wrong professor. But
Or
it's
maybe you
it's
chose the wrong UG college.
I think UG college was okay. It was that wasn't the problem. But, so okay, there was a letter of recommendation, and then you send either your GMAT or your GRE score, and ESCP also has their own test if you want to go through that. And interestingly enough, there are some business schools in France which actually take the CAT as well.
OMG.
I can't remember the name. I think ESSEC takes CAT, but I wouldn't be completely sure. But CAT is also valid over there. And you send that in all of that in your first round of applications. Then after some while, you will receive a mail that I think about 3 to 4 weeks after you send this, either you're selected for the interview round or you're not selected. And the thing is, there are four rounds of applications, and if you don't get selected in any round, that's the only time you can apply. You can't reapply in second round. Or for that year, you're done. That was something I missed out on, so I was very worried. Okay, no. Okay, if I don't get in, this is it. And okay, then luckily I
So one sec, one
got
sec, one sec. There are four subsequent rounds or there are four parallel rounds? What are you trying to say?
subsequent rounds. So if there are 100 seats, for example, so first round has 25 seats. Second
Mm-hmm.
round has another 25. So like that.
Acha, acha, that makes sense. And you're supposed to fill in your form for all of these rounds, or is there a difference?
No, you just fill for one round,
Uh,
and if you're applying round one, you just apply for round one, fill the form for round one. The form is basically the same in each round. It's when you're applying. It's basically a probability chance that, uh,
More like
like,
a wait list.
yeah, like as you go on, the number of seats become lesser and lesser and lesser. So the highest chance is probably in the first round. By the fourth round, most of the seats are gone. So you
Makes sense.
don't have as high of a chance to get in as compared to the first or second round.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Yeah.
So
So
yeah, you were saying?
yeah, so after that I got in. So I can tell you about the interview round as well.
Yeah, let's
Or
build upon
if you
that. I mean,
say
after
something,
GMAT, GRE,
yeah.
we had this thing. You submitted a form, full-blown comprehensive form with all sorts of questions and responsibilities, etc. Then you were shortlisted. You were what do you call receiving a mail from the university. Are you shortlisted for the interview or not? And what is the time gap between submitting the form and receiving the call for interview?
About 3 to 4 weeks.
3 to 4 weeks. That's a very less what do you call amount of time. So after that, what happened with the interviews? Yeah.
Yeah. So with the interview was we uh, we got. I think I found something on the internet how to prepare for the interview, and I tried with the consultancy as well. And that was probably the only thing which was a bit useful that I got to get to do a mock interview. That was probably the only helpful thing. And so because the mock interview helped me a little bit, that she gave me some advice. Okay, you can improve on this. You can be prepared for these answers. And by the way, like those answers, like whatever questions said, okay, they can come in the interview. None of them came in the interview because they were mostly basic questions like, oh, what are your strengths? What are your weaknesses? The questions you basics.
Yeah,
So
yeah.
none of those questions were asked in the ESCP interview. I mean, those are very straightforward.
Yeah, yeah, yeah.
Maximum they that was when the interview started. Basically, they introduced themselves and they told me how the interview is going to be conducted. Basic interview that there were two people and there was going to be a back and forth at the end of the interview. I can ask my questions and that would be it. So the interview started. They basically asked me, "Okay, please introduce yourself." I had already prepared a short
Yeah.
introduction where it was a proper flow of order. So what I did in the past, why I did it, what I'm doing right now, and why am I doing it, what I want to do in the future, and why I want to do it.
Wow.
So that was pretty much in 2 minutes, and they asked me questions like, uh, why do you want to, the basic question, why do you want to study in the school, and why France? They also just asked me, why don't you want to study in the UK?
Yep.
Given that you're from India, you speak English, you spend time over there. So, and they can also catch you on something very small. So, for instance, I mentioned that while traveling, I talked to people from Spain, people from Greece, and discussed how what our cultures are like. So, after not directly after that, like 2 or 3 questions after that, Arman, you mentioned you had talked to people of different cultures and talked to them about different cultures. What are the cultural similarities between India and Spain? And for
Whoa!
me, okay, I
That
knew
must have
something
thrown you
about
off, man.
that completely threw me off. I'm like, I know things about culture of Spain, but I don't know what exactly
You
are
can't
the
find
similarities.
similarities, right?
I started thinking about the food. Okay, food, something similar. I started thinking of movies. The first movie that came to my mind was in the
Zindagi
Milegi
na
Dobara.
milegi dobara.
I actually told them, okay, there's a very famous movie. It's my favorite movie. So I had to buy time as well to come up with something. And luckily, very luckily, I remember that on some YouTube video somewhere, I had read that these Romani people they came from India to Europe, and the flamenco dance of Spain was actually evolved from the dance of Romani people. So that's where I found the cultural similarity. The Rajasthani folk
Whoa.
dance of India and the
Whoa.
flamenco of the Spain are is one thing that is culturally similar.
The ability to think about it on the interview, on your feet.
Yeah, yeah. I mean, that threw me off. The good thing was I did not panic. I started coming up with some nonsense like Zindagi Na Milegi Dobara. That helped me because I thought of the song Senorita and the flamenco thing. That's what triggered it actually.
Oh. Yeah,
Yeah, yeah.
yeah, yeah, yeah. You
It
need to
was
have
I
the train of
this
thought in place.
yeah, that randomness actually led me to that answer.
Wow. And the fact that you really like ZNMD, that also helped you.
Yeah, yeah, of course. And
Who would have thought? Who would have thought that, man?
I know. I mean, in these interviews, they're mostly so because you're going to be a student, they're not saying how much you know. You're going there to learn, but that's your thought process. Like even if you don't know anything, how are you able to connect the dots? How are
Hmm.
you? What's your logic of thinking? That's actually what they're checking. They're not. They did ask me questions about like what. So at that time, Russia and Ukraine war was quite high, and they expected you to know about the general affairs. They would ask you to talk about it as well. The good thing was they told me like you can talk about whatever you want. So it was not the case for everybody. Like with some of them, they gave them a specific topic, and I think it depended on their SOPs. So if somebody said they want to get into finance, they probably ask them finance questions, and that way it was quite good. And the interview environment was quite comfortable for me. They didn't. make me feel pressured. They gave me the time and space that I wanted to take. I mean, of course, I couldn't go on forever. In the mail they said the interview would last 20 minutes. For me, it lasted like 30 or 35 minutes. So there was that
It was
flexibility.
online.
It was online, yeah, and because they were taking it from France.
I get it. I get it.
Yeah. So and the other questions were like they also asked me about the placement self, and the question they asked me was what what did people like about you in the placement cell and what did they dislike about you in the
Whoa.
placement cell.
Whoa.
One thing is that they're going to go thoroughly through your resume, so it's better that you know everything clearly because they're going to ask unexpected questions. It could be yeah, it's like what did people like about you and didn't like about you. What was was there any politics involved?
Hmm.
So like questions you wouldn't expect normally in a business school interview.
Wow.
So
Like and dislike. Yeah, man.
out with your resume and actually being open to thoughts, like connect the dots. Just remember, it's about the way you think, not about your knowledge. It's about the way
More
you
than
think.
accuracy, the train of thought is what they lay a lot of
Exactly.
emphasis on.
Exactly. Because I'm sure that I might have messed up something or my answer wasn't probably satisfactory, but I think they looked at the way I was thinking rather than what maybe like if I was analyzing the Russian Ukraine war scenario, maybe I might have like missed out on some points, but they
Hmm.
didn't really comment on that.
Yep. So, will it be a what do you call a sensible statement to make when I say the fact that the interview was more inclined towards the HR spectrum of things rather than the technical aspect of things?
For me, yes, but there's another friend who actually came in round four. He told me that his interview was like a consulting interview that they gave them a case to do and like whatever they expect in a consulting interview after a case talking about they ask about general affairs in every interview. So it actually depends on the interview you're getting. For me, I got two PhD students, so and that guy got a professor. So maybe it also depends on who is interviewing you.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And so, when I talk of the chances of shortlisting, what do you think are a few factors that might play spoil spot? For example, poor academics. Will that be a very, what do you call, significant hurdle if somebody's trying to make it into ESCP?
I think so because these business schools, even though they're not, if you compare to India, they're not as academically inclined, but they do expect you to be at least in the top 10 percentile of your class. And I know cases where they haven't, like students who haven't scored extremely high, but then they make it up by being in prestigious universities. The
Mm-hmm.
academics is actually quite important. And the other big important thing is your international experience. So whether you have done an exchange, whether you have hosted somebody in your country, whether you know different languages, so that
Mm-hmm.
plays a big uh, advantage in your resume because EACP is something which is very big on its international experience, and probably that helps in other business schools as well, but not as much as in ESCP. And then GMAT, it's probably 10 to 20%, not even 20, probably 10% of your entire profile. So being big on academics and being big on your um,
International
extracurricular
exposure.
international career, your extracurriculars, they're not really big on your work experience because there are people who haven't done any like they have done internship, but maybe one, and they still get it because that's the point of MIM. They're training you for the business world. So it's
Yep.
okay if you don't. It's an added benefit that you did something before, but
Yep.
that's why also they have that 36-week mandatory internship.
Wow.
Yeah.
All of it makes sense, Arman. So talking about the expenditure that is involved, right from the time that you chose to fill the form, of
Yeah.
course we get that the what do you call expenditure made towards the consultancy was a this thing sunk cost.
Yeah.
You couldn't get literally anything of value out of it. But apart from that,
Yeah.
what about the entire journey? Can you give a little breakdown of that?
Yeah. So the application fees for me, if I got to do it for free because of a technical glitch, and
Whoa!
I had paid it, but it would show that I haven't paid it. And when I checked my bank, I wouldn't see like it was there, but then it got refunded, and on the website I wasn't able to pay anymore. So I mailed them, okay, I can't pay anymore. I got the amount refunded. I can pay again. But by that time, applications were closed, so they were like, okay, it's fine. So it's okay. So,
Yep.
but the application fees is I think around, I think it was 150 euros if I'm not wrong. Yeah, but something around that. And
150 euros.
yeah, yeah. And if I talk about the tuition fees, if you get selected, you have to pay a deposit, which is also a part of your tuition fees, which is in Indian rupees, it's comes down to around 5 lakh rupees.
Mm-hmm.
Uh, and the tuition fees for my year, it was 23,000 euros. But the thing is, for new admissions, they adjusted according to inflation every year.
Oh.
So it's going to be the same for me, like for both the years. But somebody who's in new, it probably might be more. But if inflation in the future goes down and prices come down, it can be lesser as well. Of course, there's difference between EU students and non-EU students. EU students also have to pay 20,000 euros. So it's quite, actually, it's quite high, even for European standards.
Yep, yep, yes.
Actually, most universities cost this much, but then you make it up for it by like your jobs. Probably it's going to take longer, but then the amount, that's how it's justified. The amount you're going to spend. That's the only way you can sort of
Landing a
just.
job is the only way you can justify the ROI at the end
Yeah,
of the day.
yeah, you can have the international experience, but if you're spending that kind of money, you can probably have a vacation in that country for 4 months and also have that international experience.
Exactly, exactly. And about the 23,000 euros, that's for 1 year or both the
That's for
years?
1 year. That's for 1 year.
So that's 46,000 euros for the entire program.
Yeah, exactly.
So that's in Indian rupees, is it 46 lakhs? If I do recollect that 100 rupees is what
Approximately,
equals to 1 year.
approximately, because 90 rupees like it varies. So from like
100 is the
85 to
average.
90, yeah, yeah, it's easier calculation than yeah,
Yeah,
100.
100. So
Yeah.
46 lakhs is the expenditure upfront. And do you get any scholarship? Are you, what do you call, eligible for any scholarship? Yeah.
So ESCP provides need for basis scholarship, so you can apply for that whenever you want to, like even your second year or first year before your admission, you can apply for that. And there's an academic scholarship as well that if you're a genius, you scored 800 on the GMAT or something like that. There are scholarships for that as well. And then the Indian government also provides some scholarship which are like the Char Pass. I know Char Pass scholarship, and there are one or two more scholarships which are provided. But you need to be careful with the terms and conditions of some scholarships. Not for France, but if somebody is going to UK, for example. I remember I had this friend who got a scholarship, but the terms of the scholarship were that after you're done with your education, you'll have to come back to India.
Oh,
So if that doesn't align with your
long-term objectives.
yeah, then just be careful with that.
So,
And
what are the grounds on which a person can get scholarships? Academic grounds,
yeah,
scoring really high on GMAT, or is there any income profiling as well? For example, you hail from a very underprivileged family.
yeah,
Is there
for sure.
income profiling as well?
Yeah, the need for basic scholarship is exactly that. You provide the financial documents, you write an essay stating, okay, why you need this scholarship, and you can like I know people who have got 30% scholarships. Like the university decides the percentage. It ranges from I'm not sure of the range.
Exact
I
component.
I know it's not 100%. You don't get 100% scholarship in the need for basis, but I know quite a few people who have got 30% of their tuition fees for both years.
And what is the maximum amount, as in the form of retribution or in the form of scholarship that a student can avail? What is the
Uh,
maximum amount?
they don't necessarily get an amount, but the percentage off. So I think I exactly don't know the maximum number. I think it's up to the university what they think is right. If somebody is underprivileged and has an excellent profile, they probably wouldn't want to lose that person. So they can
Makes
be
sense.
flexible
Makes
that way.
sense. It's all about how well your profile is going out to be.
Exactly, exactly.
So that was a pretty comprehensive picture on
Yeah.
the way the admission procedures, the kind of experiences a student is going through when he's trying to get into ESCP. Talking of your personal experience of getting to be at Paris and being in that I mean, I'll not call it well privileged, but I'll call it very well established B school. So
Yeah.
what were your initial impressions like when you landed in Paris for that
So
program?
interestingly enough, my first semester wasn't in Paris. It was in London.
Uh huh.
So when you get selected, EACP asks you to give five preferences. So they have campuses on five different countries and one operational in Warsaw, but it's for students it's closed right now. Um, so I put Paris as my first option and London as my second option. Interestingly, the Paris campus, the original campus, was going through renovation. So I got to go to the London campus first. So in London, now the thing is, in London there are big names: LSE, LBS, Imperial, and ESCP. People in the UK don't necessarily know about ESCP. Their companies know about them, but if you ask a layman, they probably not know about ESCP.
Yep.
So the first impressions were, it wasn't about the, because personally I knew about EACP, so that wasn't a thing that played a part. But the first impression was the international environment for sure. Because the moment you step in, you see people of, I mean, you can't tell by the faces, of course, but by the languages you hear. You hear French, Italian, German, Chinese, even in Indian languages, because there are people from different parts. You could hear Malayalam, Tamil, a lot of, I mean, a lot of
Diversity.
diversity for me as well. That there aren't a lot of people from Delhi, so I'm learning few words every time. It's mostly swear words, so I'm not gonna say them on the podcast. But learning different words of Indian language, which I never did because of my ignorance, probably. But the moment you enter, you can hear different languages, and all the people are actually quite happy on the first day. Of course, it's the first day. You finally made it to the place you wanted to, and the campus on the London campus, it's not huge. It's big in the sense of surface area, but not like floors or stuff like that. And so my first impressions were like, okay, this is interesting. Okay, let me talk to people. Initially, of course, everybody is open to talking to you. But one thing about ESCP and France in general is that they have this thing called the pre-masters year, and where it's not comparable to anything in India, but it's it's sort of like quota, like injury thing. A lot of people do
I get
coaching and then they get in. So a lot of people already had friends made before they came into the
it.
masters. So actually making new friends was a little bit more challenging than I thought it would be, because people already had their friend circles in place. And one thing was that initially you're a bit uncomfortable, a bit hesitant to get out of your comfort zone.
Yep.
So Indians were sticking together with Indians, French were sticking together with French, Italians with Italians, and so on and so forth. But I think it actually comes down to you as an individual. How much effort are you willing to make? So if you're with Italians, just learn a few Italian phrases. Just learn how to say "How are you," and they love that. And for me, I think so. That was a bit hard in the first semester, but and London as a city, of course, I'll talk about the city as well, because the campus was in London has these zones: Zone One, which is the center core part; Zone Two, Zone Three, and it goes up to Zone Nine. So the campus was in Zone Two, so not very far away from the center, and probably one of the best localities of London. Probably one of next to the wealthiest locality, which is Hampstead. So it was in West Hampstead. So pretty good area, and because campus wasn't huge, one good thing was you got to see everybody every time. So at the end of the first semester, it felt like a big family,
Wow.
because like even if you didn't know the names, you knew them by face. And so that was the first semester. I mean, of course, getting used to the cold and wet weather was one challenge, and getting used to the public transport. And about the accommodation thing, I've also mentioned, because ESCP does not provide you accommodation. It has tie-up with rental agencies.
Third party hostels.
Yeah. But you have to find your own accommodation. So for me, one thing I messed up with, which I probably also advise the people, I rushed into finding an accommodation. So if you're going in September and you start finding an accommodation from January, you're not gonna have that many options. And I chose something which I had to pay for immediately. So I was logged into that, which was far away from the campus, not in a great area. And uh, basically, I had to travel for about an hour or sometimes more than an hour to get to the campus and come back in the cold, wet weather. And also be careful, because nowadays even London isn't the safest city as well. You have to be careful at night. So it would be the same with Paris, that I wouldn't rush into finding an accommodation. If probably find it 2 to 3 months before you're actually landing in the place.
Yep.
And but you need to take off the visa, because you need to show something for the visa. But then there are ways to get through that if you'd like to book an Airbnb which is cancelable or something like that. So okay, so that, but the experience really augmented, got better in the Paris campus. I came to Paris in January, and this is where ESCP belongs. Everybody knows about ESCP, and the campus is huge. So it was like a and it was like a big change. The weather also improved because we were coming towards the summers.
Yeah.
Everything just it was basically like a big glow up.
It was like an upgrade.
Yeah, yeah, for sure. And one thing was that also after in the first semester you have to study everything in business, so accounting, finance, HR, marketing. You study everything. So a lot of time the classes were at 8 a.m. in the morning as well. And if there was some subject you don't like and you have to get up at 6 or 7 a.m. to get to that 8 a.m. class,
Yeah.
it wouldn't be the best.
Yep, yep, yep.
But in the second semester onwards, you get to choose your specialization. So
I
you're studying something which you're actually
really
interested in.
impressed with. Yep.
Exactly, exactly. So there's a big difference in my first impression. So with the ACP, it's also that you get first impression every semester if you change cities. London was a different first impression. Paris
Yep.
was a different first impression. I'm planning to go to Madrid in the next semester. That's going to be a different first impression.
Wow. So
Yeah,
you get to
yeah.
choose your locality for every semester. Like every semester is supposed to be at a different campus. Is there a rule like that?
The rule is you need to study on at least two campuses. So there are 4 academic semesters. So you can spend 3 semesters on the same campus, but at least for one semester you need to either go to London, you could stay on Paris, you could go to Berlin, there's Madrid, and there's one campus in Turin as well. Or you could go for exchange programs as well, if you'd like to.
All of that makes a lot of sense, Arman. And talking about your expenditure with regard to house rental, when you
Yeah,
talk
yeah.
of living in a shady area and having to, undergo a travel hour of, I don't know, 1 or 1.5 hours, how much were you spending? And what is the average spend that a person should carry out here?
So in London, I would say the average rent is probably depends on the kind of if you want a one room, if you want a room to yourself and something decent, it would probably be around £1,000 uh,
1,000
on average.
Holy
And
shit. That's for
yeah,
per month.
per month. Yes, yes, yes.
OMG.
If you're willing to live far away, like if you're willing to live in zone 5, zone 6, the rent probably comes down to 600, £700, but it's still a lot. And if you want a
600
private
pounds is
bath,
still a lot of money, man.
if you want if you want to stay in something like zone 2 or zone 1, you can find places for 700, £800, but that's like spare room sort of stuff that somebody is away for a while and they want sublet the rooms or something like that. You can find that a lot of students actually do that. They find rooms which are being subletted. So the owner is away for a while and they're willing to give away the room. So that's probably cheaper. Like you can get that for cheaper. In my case, I went through an Airbnb. I talked to the landlord on Airbnb. So I got my accommodation for £800.
Mhm.
But I didn't consider the fact that public transportation in London is expensive as well. Because I
Oh,
thought, okay, I'd use the public transportation, it's fine. But every time so I had to take a bus and the tube, which would cost me £3 approximately one way. So that would be £6 every day.
every
£6 every day. And if you multiply that by 25 or
180
20,
days. That's like
so
1100. OMG.
yeah, exactly, exactly. So public transportation was this London.
1.2 lakhs on public transport. OMG.
So you could probably get an Oyster card, which gets subsidized for students, but for some reason my Oyster card wouldn't give me that discount, so I was stuck over there as well.
Wow.
So
All of these difficulties with getting to live in a foreign this thing country, man.
yeah, yeah. I mean, I
So
would
all in all, it accrues to 15 lakhs per year on
um
annual basis.
if you talk about your living expenses, so it also depends on the kind of lifestyle you lead. If I'll take extreme examples. So somebody who is trying to just skim by, trying to spend as less as you could probably find a place in zone 5, zone 6 for £500, cook everything at home, and be done with everything in £800 per month That would still be 800 pounds, even if you're trying to.
That'll still be 10 lakhs per year.
Yeah, yeah, yeah. And if somebody who doesn't care, it it's endless. It's
Can
London.
go
You
on
can,
and on.
but on average, I would say that £1,000 for rent and 400 to 500 pounds on if you want to have like a decent experience. If you want to go out, you want to enjoy a little bit, then £500 besides your rent
So
for
that's
sure.
1,500 pounds per month. So you spent a semester over there. It'll
Yeah.
be 10,000 pounds for the entire
Lon-
semester.
London, the only thing which was a drawback for me in London was the price, for sure.
Yep.
Besides that, I think London was a great city. It's just very expensive. Not just for Indians. If you ask a European, probably they would probably say the same. It's too expensive because people say Paris is expensive. After coming to Paris from London, I was like, oh my god, everything is so cheaper.
What about Paris though? What are the accommodation expenditures over there like?
The accommodation is for sure much cheaper than London. So you could start getting accommodations from 400, 500 euros, and then of course it could go up to as much as you'd like. And one good thing about Paris, France, is that the government actually provides you sort of a subsidy if you're under 25, you're a student or doing an internship. So up to 250 euros they can pay for you to the landlord
Oh,
if you're a student. And then there are a lot of health, social benefits as well. So in that terms, Paris is a lot cheaper than London, probably.
France has a lot of impetus on social expenditure. Oh,
Yeah, yeah, like your health expenditures are completely free, or maybe like 10%, 20%, but you can get that covered from insurance because insurance is compulsory in France. Then because ESCP is from France, they have a lot of like they, for example, they have partnership with banks, and you don't have to pay the initial fees, you don't have to maintain a minimum balance, you don't have to pay for insurance necessarily. So there are a lot of benefits in France. So
so
I'd
so when I
say,
talk about Paris, what is the accrued expenditure on annualized
yeah, yeah.
basis?
Okay, so if I again I'll take the extreme example and
Yep.
then the average person. So if you're somebody who's going at the minimum, it could be done in 800 euros. The same, like convert pound to euros, like four to 500 euros rent. Public transportation isn't that expensive. You can buy an annual pass, which you pay around 300 or something euros for 1 year. So you can basically travel for free after.
That's pretty
Not
cheap
free,
though.
but yeah, yeah. So on the first month, you
Not by
probably,
Indian standards.
yeah, no, of course not by Indian standards. So you pay that. So once you pay that, just second month onwards, the public transportation cost is zero after that. So and food and all groceries are surprisingly more expensive in Paris than in London, but going out is cheaper in Paris. So in all that you can survive in 700 euros, 7 to 800 euros. And if I talk about an average person who's want to enjoy a little bit as well, but also want to make sure of his expenditure, probably 800 euros in rent, and then again same around 500 to 600 euros in going out, and then you get the car, which can go about 200 euros. So subtract that from anything, like the guy who's spending minimum and the guy who's spending average. So on
So
average,
on
I was,
average, 8 lakhs.
yeah,
8 lakhs. 8 lakhs. 8 lakhs by Indian standards is pretty decent, right?
probably more than 8 lakh, because if you
6.4 into 12 into this thing 80.
yeah, because the thing with CAF is that you don't get it immediately. You get it after a few months, but then the good thing is like whatever amount was due, they give that all at once, so
Wow.
you get it back.
That's pretty cool, man. That's pretty cool. Paris turns out to be. I was never aware of the fact that France has such a what do you call emphasis on social expenditure.
Oh yeah, yeah,
I
for sure,
never knew that, man. Whoa. And
for
yeah,
sure.
so given the fact that you got your this thing accommodation done, you had to this thing go into permeate through the friend circles and land friendships of your own. Get to hear
Yeah,
all of those languages, be a part of the
yeah,
diversity. And apart from that, what about the curriculum though? What are the how are the subjects spread? What is the semester like? What is the grading pattern?
yeah. So, so like I mentioned, the first semester you have to study every business subject, and the the academic part is quite typical in the first semester that you study throughout the semester. You have continuous assessments. So every professor has their own way. Like some can judge it through class participation, some can take tests, and at the end of everything, you have final exams, which is quite typical. That's a typical pattern. That at the end of the semester, you have an exam.
One second. The number of subjects in the first semester are?
So I think there are nine. Let me see. So there is corporate finance. There is international financial reporting. There's data-driven marketing. There's HR. There's organization management, management control, and there's also a seminar, Digital Spark seminar, which gives you a basics of technology and how it's affecting business. That's not really something which comes in the final exam. And then there is a strategy subject. So I'm in about 8 subjects. Um, and yeah, so so for some subjects you just directly have the final exam and some continuous assessments. For instance, in strategy, we had to provide a presentation of a company, like a proper consulting project. Like what are the challenges that we did in our group at Netflix. So like what challenges Netflix faces, what what is it doing well, what recommendations do you provide, and like that was the presentation. So that was 50% of the marks. Then we also had a final exam for that. So we had final exam for 8 subjects, and then there were continuous assessments for everything, and
What is
that
the
was quite
distribution like? 50% for the continuous assessment, 50% for the final examinations.
varies by subject. So for strategy, for instance, that it was the presentation and the final exam was all that mattered. It was okay if you didn't really participate in the class, and there were no mini tests like that. It depended on professor as well. Actually, my professor didn't have any mini tests. There were different there were different groups. So group A, B, C. So depending on the professor you get,
Does the
and
location that you were saying something?
yeah, yeah. And for example, for instance, marketing, we had just 2 continuous assessments and 1 final exam. And if you compare to accounting, which was IFRS, we had like 10 continuous assessments and then the final exam. So it really varied by uh, the subject. So
It's
the
pretty
ones which
subjective
were,
to the professor.
we didn't have any midterm examination except for finance. So like, makes sense. Finance is a more heavy subject compared to marketing.
Makes sense, makes sense. So, Arman, if there's one question that I had on mind is the fact that
Yeah.
you mentioned that it is mandatory for all the students to pursue their masters from 2 different locations.
Yeah.
So, is there
Yeah.
a change in how the subjects are allocated? Is there a change in pedagogy when I talk of campuses on Paris and London?
Yes, yes, for sure. So, not there's something different about each campus. So, there are about I think 67 specializations you get to choose from. So, typically,
67. Did I hear that
exactly,
right? 67.
exactly, exactly. So it's not typical like you want to do marketing, you just choose a marketing. You want to do finance, you choose finance. There's I would call them sub specializations. For example, if you want to do finance, but you want to do investment banking particularly, so there's a specialization in investment banking. If you want to do corporate finance, there's specifically a specialization corporate finance. If you want to do marketing, but you don't want to do consumer marketing, you want to get into digital marketing, there's specialization for that. So that is the amount of flexibility ESCP provides you.
Amount of
It's
precision,
very
more precisely, right?
I would say yeah, precision, but you can also like combine things. For example, I did my specialization last semester in Paris was digital transformation. So that was about tech. But if I want to do investment banking, I could do that. Like I could use the knowledge I gained from that specialization and see how it connects to investment banking.
Finance. Yeah.
Exactly. Or if I want to change it to marketing, if I want to get into consulting, you can connect different subjects. And the pedagogy depends on the specialization you take. So in my case, the digital transformation specialization, it's actually a new specialization. So it came about 3 years ago. And there were different subjects. So there were subjects related to tech consulting, subjects related to HR, not really marketing or finance, but more about how can businesses transform themselves, adopt different technologies. In that, we got to interact with a lot of external companies. That was one thing I really appreciated. It wasn't just pure academics. We got to have company visits. A lot of people from different companies came to teach us, give presentations, And also, besides the specialization, you also have a management course which you can choose from. And I chose to do operations. And one of my professors was actually the global supply head chain of global supply head,
Supply chain
of,
head. Yeah.
yeah, of Michelin, and
Of
getting to study Michelin, the Michelin tires. So getting to
oh,
study from him directly, the guy who manages at such
entire
a high
world.
level. So
Yeah.
that exposure was very valuable. And interestingly, didn't have a final exam. It had a game which you had to do throughout the semester, where you were in charge of a factory. And at the end, whatever your net profit was, how much contracts you had, how much sales you did, that was the
You were
basis of
supposed to
your
manage inventory, etc.
that was the basis of your grading. And for my specialization, it was so some had final exams like the typical final exam, some had group projects where, for example, we had to submit a research paper and present it in front of a jury in another company. So
Wow.
most that's also a very typical thing of ESCP, that you have to present your findings, your presentation or your research paper to the jury, and probably in another company. So
Probably
if
in
you
another
talk
country.
company.
Company.
So if you're in a consulting specialization, then again you're going to have a lot of company visits. You're going to be working with the company actually a lot of the time. So I know
Wow.
friends who are directly talking to the CFOs of the company directly through the professor, or directly even sometimes. If you're
Wow.
talking about finance, then also you get to audit some companies, for instance. So it's very practical, that phase. It's not just pure academic, but also quite updated. For instance, there was one exam. It was by a professor who was retiring, so quite aged, probably in his 70s. And the final exam was okay, you come to the class, use your laptop. You want to talk to your friend? Talk to your friend. You want to use ChatGPT? Use ChatGPT. It doesn't matter what you're doing as long as your answer is good, because when you're going to be working in the workplace, nobody's going to tell you that don't talk to your colleague, don't go on the internet.
Yep.
You're going to be allowed to do that. So that makes you more, uh, actually more realistic.
Market based and practical. That's what makes you practical
Exactly. That's something which I could have never imagined probably when I was
in the
studying
Indian
in.
curriculum.
Yeah.
So there's a lot of emphasis. There's an incredible amount of emphasis on the industrial exposure part. That is what I
Yeah.
make out of whatever your curriculum at ESCP is. And what about a typical lecture? Is it driven exclusively by Harvard case studies, or is there something else involved as well?
There are Harvard case studies for sure, but it's not completely driven by that. So they're probably out of 10 classes, they'd give you Harvard case studies in 2 or 3 classes, but it could be it's simple presentations where the professor is talking, you're listening. Then it could be a company is coming in, they present their ideas, and on the spot, they give you a task, and you have to,
Whoa.
yeah, like maybe for instance, there was one HR consulting company which came in, and they were introducing a new, basically a sort of a chatbot for their employees, and we had to analyze that and give them suggestions. And we had to do that in like 15, 20 minutes, create a presentation, give the presentation, understand everything, create the presentation and present it. So during the semester, I gave a lot of presentation and really quickly. So your ability to think really quickly.
And your agility as well. Wow.
Exactly.
And what about a typical day? You told that one of your classes began from 8 a.m. in the morning. What
Yeah.
was the maximum threshold until which the classes lasted every day?
So normally, I would say it was quite a strange schedule. I'd say because you knew what the
Everything is going on to be strange.
I mean, because you knew the schedule in advance. But for example, on Monday we used to have class from 8 a.m. in the morning till 7:30 p.m. in the night. But
Whoa, that's quite
Tuesday
fast.
no classes. Wednesday probably from 1:30 to 6, then something like that only. On average, the class would last around 2 to 3 hours per subject, and yeah, that was the typical day. So for the first year students, it's more hectic because you have more subjects. As you go on, the people who are in the second year, they don't have these core courses. For example, we had to study law and sustainability, which are core courses, which are not there in the second year. So that's completely free for them. So then they don't have to show up at 8 a.m. for those classes.
And you mentioned
And
that one of your lectures, most of your lectures lasted for 2 hours. So that's
Yeah.
4 subjects per day.
So on Mondays we used to have, yes, 4 subjects. On Wednesday and Thursday there'd be 2 subjects, and Friday as well there'd be 2 subjects.
So that's
Tuesday wouldn't have any classes.
so
But as the semester
cumulatively.
goes on, the load becomes lesser because then you have to spend more time doing things on your own, because in the second year you're writing your thesis. In the first semester we had classes every day. Sometimes there were 2 days where we had 8 a.m. classes.
Mhm. Cumulatively 30 hours of classes per week. Is that a good estimate?
I think so. I think so. Yeah.
Or probably
Yeah.
lesser than that. Probably lesser than that.
So if you talk about the entire semester, there were courses which were the specialization courses. You have to study 30 hours for each subject. So if there are 5 subjects in total, you study 150 hours for them. Then there are core courses where you study for 15 hours in total of the entire semester.
That makes sense. That gives us a good picture about whatever your courses were like. And so, moving about with the exposure part again. So, you mentioned that there's a lot of diversity, and there's also a pre-masters thing where most of the people
Yeah,
got to get into circles. What about the
yeah.
rest of the exposure? You mentioned the industrial exposure part, but what about the exposure where you go about winning case competitions, getting better at landing jobs?
Yeah. So I mentioned earlier the portal job teaser.
Hmm.
So you can practice cases with them, if you want to. And besides that, probably every week there were multiple events happening in the school or outside of school. For instance, I attended some where Deloitte came in for the case competition. Louis Vuitton held a competition in the campus, and there were tech companies coming. Accenture came in a lot, and there were different companies coming in. But it was completely voluntary. That if you want to, you can make use of it. So, and for every field, HR, there's somebody coming in. Finance, there's somebody coming in. There were people from the government coming in. There were people from industries coming in. For example, there's a big train line, Eurostar, in Europe. The CEO of that company was coming in. So that ways, you actually, if you don't want to do things just online, you can actually go in front of people who are from the company and take advice from them on the spot, and also do networking. So a great
Wow.
opportunity for networking and learning. Like if you want to do consulting, so cases. If you want to get into finance, then learning the insights. If you want to get into tech consulting, learning whatever new software or what the company is doing with AI. You get to learn that practically.
Getting to have a first-hand experience is really imperative in building a career.
Exactly.
Going out
Exactly.
there
And
trying to interact with
one
everybody.
thing is that ESCP provides you with the tool. So for instance, these are all voluntary things. You can make use of it or you can
Most of the
let it go.
resources. Yep.
It's completely up to you.
Makes sense. Makes sense. It's more about the go-getter mentality. If you are the go-getter, you'll
Exactly.
get it.
Exactly. Exactly.
So
Even
the
the
most
clubs
of
are
the,
made that way. Yeah. Most of the
I get it.
clubs,
I get it.
yeah.
Yeah, you were mentioning about the clubs. Most of the clubs and committees as well have that responsibility of going out there and getting things done.
Yeah, yeah. For example, there were consulting clubs where you have to find contacts through LinkedIn, and you do live projects for companies. It could be for free as well, or if the because it was mostly for startups, so it was mostly free, but you could also get paid as well when
Ah,
you're working as a student.
and building upon that as well, if there's one thing that most of the people who are watching this podcast should be aware of, is the fact that unlike India, there are no on-campus placements when it comes to international B schools. Placements on campus is a myth when it comes to them. So, Arman, can you give me a little overview about how you landed your placement and how you landed your job out of the campus?
Okay, so I think I got very lucky in that aspect because I didn't have to put in a lot of effort. So um, I took use of the career center. So okay, one thing is that ACP organizes a career fair on each campus where different companies come in, where you can give your resume and talk to. It's mostly HRs who come. So that is sort of, you could say, similar to the campus placement, but you don't get placed over there.
Yep, yep, yep.
It's more of a networking thing.
Mm-hmm.
You get to know the HR directly. Uh,
Mm-hmm.
so that was where I realized that okay, one thing, my resume is not up to the standard, and the other thing I realized was if you're in France, knowing French is quite essential because I would go to the companies and talk to them about the jobs, and the moment I would ask about French, say that I don't know French that well, they say sorry. It would be direct sorry, like no. So that is one challenging part. Like, and it changes by country. If you're in Germany, it's going to be German. If you're in the UK, it's going to be English. And so I took use of the career center that way. So hel- firstly I did it for my resume, and I improved my resume. Then I talked about my career trajectory. I said that okay, I want to get into consulting, but I don't speak French. And the guy directly told me, if you want to work in France and consulting right now, and you don't know French, stop applying to consulting because told me directly you're not going to get it. So instead of wasting my time, he said, what are you good at? Because make whatever internship you're getting, take it as a starting point. And I was also interested in marketing. So I was like, okay, if I'm not doing marketing right consulting right now, I'll do marketing.
Mark.
And yeah, so I again use the portal job teaser, and so there's also this environment of panic because MDI Gurgaon, right?
I do. They have a tie-up with ESCP,
They
right?
do have. Interestingly enough, there were more MDI Indian students in ESCP than Indian students of ESCP. So when I got to Paris, I was very confused because I didn't know that there were going to be so many. I never saw them on the ESCP group. Like, who are these people? Then I found out they're like 150, 180 students, and we were like less than 70 who were Indian ESCPs
Yeah.
students. And they were applying from last year, September. And a lot of them had applied like 200, 300 applications. And here we were with two, three applications. So there was an atmosphere of panic. Oh my God, like we have to apply. And right currently the European market is very, very dry. People are not getting internships easily. So I know people who have crossed 500 applications and they've gotten to the interview stage, but not are not getting anything. And they're not just applying to France; they're applying globally. For me, I was very, very lucky because I, I think I probably applied to around 20 to 25 applications. And the one thing was before I was applying, before taking the help of the career center, I was getting rejected everywhere. The moment I took help from the career center, the first job I applied to, that was the one I got in.
Oh,
Yeah. So I think going to the career center was very helpful, improving my resume, taking advice on my career trajectory, taking advice for the interview. Everything helped me. The tips were really useful. Like they taught me uh, how you're thinking. Like there were some they asked me about my experience from resume. I told them, and they're like, okay, you told me this in person. Why don't you have this written on your resume? So I'm like, okay, that's a good point. There are a lot of things you do in your experiences which you forget to write in your resume, and a lot of people just write their job description basically and some numbers. What I learned was not just about some numbers and your job description. Just show what is a problem you solved. If you solved a problem, that is something which looks very nice on your CV. And in the interview, the interview advice was quite clear. Like you have to be clear, you have to be straightforward. You can't beat around the bush. And the good thing was that I knew French at a basic level, so there are different levels in French: A1, A2, B1, B2, C1, C2. So I had done French at a B1 level, which is intermediate. So most companies require at least a B2, but if you have a decent profile, if you're from a good business school, B1 also works. So you have to do everything on your own. You have to either you go through LinkedIn, you go through job teaser, you find referrals, but you have to do everything on your own. The school can provide you the network. They have a big alumni network. But ultimately, it's you who needs to go out and get whatever you want to get.
wow, wow. So you mean to say that the career cell, which is in place from the university, that really played a part in
Yeah,
helping you hone your skills?
for sure, for sure.
That's a very good way of looking at things. And apart from that, what about the rest of the candidates? Where do they apply? Most of them apply on the this thing job portal itself.
Uh, that's the first part because that's where you get the first posting of the company. So that's where you have the advantage.
Yep,
But
yep.
that's not where they limit themselves. They're going everywhere. They're going on LinkedIn. A lot of them have networks, so they get referrals, and there are different like Indeed as well, Indeed.com. But for me personally, I never had to go through that because I found my job through job teaser.
Yeah, yeah. And about the CV and resume part as well, you mentioned it very lucidly. The fact that you just don't need to quantify your achievables, you also need to mention the impact that you're driving. More than the
Exactly,
quantification part, the impact. Wow. So
exactly, exactly.
that was a pretty comprehensive picture about the pedagogy, about the placements, about everything A to Z of ESCP. Now, coming on to your personal experience, Arman, if you had to make an opinion of the fact that you're spending 46 lakhs on the
Yeah.
academic fees, and apart from that, you're spending close to 20 lakhs on the living expenditure,
Hmm.
visa, etc., traveling. So
Yeah.
66 lakhs. So, do
Yeah.
you think the worth of 66 lakhs is it worth it to pursue a program at that cost?
So for in my experience, for me, I would say personally, it has been worth it because I would definitely say that my way of thinking has changed in the sense that I've become a lot more objective. I see things to the point, and I've learned to think on my feet more quicker. And I got a really good internship offer as well. So currently, I also have one more year to do. And what my path has been so far, the trajectory so far has been something which is aligning me to my long term objectives. So for me, if it's 66 lakh in Indian rupees, that's a lot. But then if I get to stay in France, which is actually very crucial, if you come back to India, it's going to take you longer to get your ROI. If you stay in Europe, probably, um, I think I'm on the path where it's probably more than justified for me,
Oh,
for sure. Because with my internship offer, with the name of the school and the kind of contacts I'm making, so I know people who have their own family businesses. I know people who are super smart. They're already working in BCG and companies like McKinsey, and
okay.
they're already over there. So the network, and this is not just these are close friends as well. So that network and yes, those two things, and even the professors over there, they are really good. Uh, they provide really good guidance.
Justify
So
the academic
I
value.
not have the personal touch which Indian professors have, but they are good mentors in the way that they'll acknowledge your efforts. They'll acknowledge that you want guidance, and they'll set you off on the right path.
Wow, wow, wow. So talking about the ROI again specifically, can we discuss a little bit about the salaries as well as intricately as
Yeah,
possible?
yeah,
So
sure.
you mentioned that ESCP has a great contribution in the way most of the people get to enjoy a hike in their salaries. You were mentioning that one individual from 10K to 37K,
Yeah,
that is what her increment was like.
yeah.
What is your average stipend like, and what is an average salary that a person can expect out of ESCP?
Okay, so if I talk about when you're in your internships, so when you're still studying, so the internship range from around 600 euros and goes up to 2500 euros. But on average, in Paris, you can expect to get around 1400 or 15,
That's
1400,
per month.
about 40, that's per month. And if you're in Germany, I have a friend who is getting paid around 2200 euros. In Paris, I know people who are getting paid around from like varying from. I know somebody who's getting paid 600 euros. I also know somebody who's getting paid 2100 euros.
So we'll again have the same method, high, low, and then we find the average.
Yeah, the average is for. It's probably for, because most people I'm talking to, the average is around 1400 euros. And after you graduate, the average salary, the average, complete average, and most of the people are working in France, about more than 50%, probably 50 to 60%. They are getting paid around 54 to 50. The average, exact average given on the website is, I think, 54,000 euros, but it could be 54 to 60,000. And so the biggest, like in terms of number, most people are working in France, followed by UK and Germany. The, your salary could change depending on the country you're in. There was a document I was trying to find before the podcast where it actually specified by nationality, by your nationality and in the country you're working, what the average salary is. So I remember seeing with India as well. I know somebody personally as well who went into ESCP, worked in Deutsche Bank, worked in Germany, and came to Mumbai and is getting paid well, like your typical investment banker.
Is he getting paid on the same scale as Germany, or is there a this thing foreign the income?
Because his position, like he got promoted when he came to India. So In Indian terms, the salary, I wouldn't tell a salary, but in Indian terms, I would say pretty good, but not at the same pay scale as in Germany, of course.
Yeah, that was something that I really wanted to find out. So on an ROI scale as well, you're getting all of your investment back right
And
after you
one
land a
thing
job.
is like I would also like to add that people like companies know ESCP. One thing because a lot of people from MDI come back and a lot of them get into good companies. And then there are a lot of French companies, German companies, and British companies which know ESCP. If you want to get into banks, most of the banks know ESCP.
Wow.
Yeah.
That's a pretty lucrative thing to look at as well. So coming towards the end of the podcast, Arman, that was a very comprehensive way of looking at not just placements but the pedagogy as well. But
Yeah.
talking of your advice to all the people out there, to all the aspirants out there when they are trying to embark on their corporate journey. So if there's one thing that I really wanted to address is the fact
Yeah.
that you set out on a path having a very clear, very clarified long-term objective that yes, this is where I'm supposed to land. I'm supposed to have an individualistic life, experience all the cultures abroad. How
Yeah.
can people achieve that clarity with what they are supposed to do in life?
Okay. I think that clarity comes when first thing you experience a lot of things early on. For me, for example, when we were in college, I got to experience what the education is like over here in government colleges in Delhi. I was very active in outside of the class as well. Even if you talk and before actually deciding to go abroad, I did a summer school to see, okay, is it for me living abroad and studying abroad? And getting to experience these different things early on gives you that clarity. Another one is also making a lot of mistakes early on and learning from them. So yeah, I knew if I probably like there was one point I was so if I talk from school, I also took engineering coaching, thinking that I'd become an engineer, then I would get into UPSC. But that was basically a mistake. Going into engineering coaching was ultimately I was not going to be an engineer. And even with UPSC, I knew that like I want to do something else in my life and also exposure that I got to talk to a lot of people who are in the services. So experiences, making mistakes, and learning from people. Like there are different options. UPSC, talk to people who have done UPSC. Chartered accountants, talk to them. People who have went abroad, talk to them and learn. Be open to learn. Like I have a lot of times people message me on LinkedIn and they ask me for advice and I tell them my opinion and they start sort of debating with me why their opinion is right and why I'm wrong. And over there, I think that person already had a bias. They just wanted that to be validated,
Why
not
even
to.
reach out when you already have an opinion on things?
Yeah, yeah, exactly. I think those three things, for sure,
Pursue experiences, being bold enough to make mistakes, and talking. Talk as much as you want to all the
for
people
sure.
out there.
Talk and learn, for sure.
Talk and learn, being open for learning as well. That's a very good way of looking at things. And Arman, apart from that, if there's another pertinent issue that I really wanted to address with you, is the fact that most of the people in India, and now I'm talking exclusively of the Southeast Asian economies, or probably people from the Eastern Hemisphere of the world, we have a lot of limitations, we have a lot of constraints when we're trying to pursue our management dreams. Even
Hmm.
if we want to make it to the top C class executives of the company, we
Yeah.
always keep questioning our objective of going to pursue an MBA. Or probably we never even consider the fact that, oh, we are supposed to pursue an MBA from abroad. We limit
Hmm.
ourselves thoroughly. How
Hmm.
do people overcome that inertia and that limitations? Anything on that?
So there are different reasons people go to study management abroad. One is to so if somebody's an engineer, so change their profession. Somebody wants just likes to live abroad, change their geography. Probably those are the two biggest reasons. And third one is changing their economic conditions. So first, figuring out yourself which of these reasons are like economic condition, moving abroad for the culture and experience part, or changing a profession. What is it that you want to do? Once you get that clarity, that's when you move on to the next step. That okay, these are my options. Okay, I know I want to move abroad for sure because a lot of time people are stuck in the middle ground. That do we go there? There are going to be so many challenges. There's going to be racism. There's going to be a glass ceiling for Indians. We're not going to be able to go abroad, go up on the corporate ladder. There's a family over here, we cannot leave them. These are the sacrifices you actually make when you're going abroad. And it's very true that it's going to be much harder for you as somebody on the Eastern Hemisphere, or like anyone who's not from that country, wherever, any abroad country. That's going to be the challenge. That you're going to face that glass ceiling in companies, so you would have to move companies. You would might not fit in with people. For instance, that I saw this personally, that for instance in French culture, the social circles, they like to be close knit. They like to be tight, and Indians are probably very open, and they like talking to a lot of different people. So that cultural clash, not exactly clash, but not fitting in correctly, something you're going to face. When you're sick, you're not going to have your family. When your family is sick, you're not going to be there for them. Of course, these are the sacrifices that come. So you need to be clear. So for me, like I mentioned before, I was a bit individualistic in that way, that I knew I'm okay with making these sacrifices for myself and for my friends and family home as well. And is after that, it's very cliche, but it's actually just working hard at one point. And it's a lot of luck for me. Like I got lucky with, maybe it was luck, maybe it was something else, that I was able to come here, get a good offer, and it's just pushing through it. The first step is just getting your foot into the door every time. Get into a good business school, that's getting foot in the door. Get a good job offer, that's foot in the door. You made contact with a C-suite person, that's foot in the door. And then you keep on going after that, keep on going after that. They're
One
going to be
door.
challenges. They're going to be the visa challenges. Like with ESCP, you face a lot of visa challenges because you're moving to different countries as well. That was one thing ESCP also prepares you for, is uncertainty, because till the end moment you don't know which country you're going to be in the next 2 months, where you have to pack all your bags, say goodbye to everybody, move, and repeat the procedure after 3 months. Don't know which country you're going to be in, move, apply for visa, move, apply for visa, move.
That's a very, this thing again, lucid way of looking at things, that you need to keep breaking one door after another and embrace this hopefulness instead of giving into what you call nihilism. Embrace that hopefulness that something is going to happen with you. That was a pretty good way of looking at things, Arman. And one last question that we would like to end this podcast with is the fact that how can a person who's trying to embark on his journey of pursuing a management program from abroad, what are the kind of things that he needs to keep in mind, and what are the mistakes that he should be avoiding? What would your take on that?
Okay. So the things you should keep in mind is that, okay, the person I'm assuming is in India, and starting his research, maybe not even his applications, his research. First, be realistic about your long-term objectives. Do you just want to go there for the education, or do you want to settle abroad? Do you want to just work there for some time, come back? What is your objective? Spend time being really clear on that. Second, after that, what do you want? Pure academics? Do you want industrial exposure? Do you want to just have the international experience? So being very clear on your objectives. What do you want? Why? Because you don't just have to. First step is justifying why you want to go abroad to yourself, and then you're also accountable to the people around you. Even if you're not financially dependent on you, you have made friendships for so long. You have your family relationships for so long. How do you justify that to them as well? Like, first, be very clear on your objectives. After that, if you're very clear, then you can filter out. If you're just going there for education, sure, go to the UK, US. You don't have to learn a new language over there. But if you're somebody, for example, also for transfer, like I mentioned, the diplomatic relationships and the economy, that was part of my long-term objective. That okay, France is a good environment that ways for me. It matches that I want to work abroad for some time. The ACP was the international exposure and in the industrial exposure, so that met my checklist. So being very operational in that sense, not being driven. Sure, being driven by your emotions is one thing, and then being blinded by your emotions is one thing. I was emotional about going abroad as well because that was something I wanted to do since I was a child. But I wasn't blinded that okay, let me just rush into everything. I think I was very operational that way. Sure, the language was a difficult thing, but I knew that's one difficult thing. If I go to another country, it's going to be one difficult thing. If I stay in India, the competition is going to be one difficult thing. So, being what to keep in mind is the objectives. Know
Clarity
your
of company
objectives.
objectives.
Know your objectives very clearly and be operational about it. Be driven by your emotional shows, but be operational. And the challenges you're going to face is, of course, you're going to have the financial challenge. Because a lot of times, for example, even ESCP, if you go for a loan, a lot of banks know them, a lot of banks don't. So, and in India, I know why the education loan is the interest is higher than a lot of countries. So,
11-12% is it?
yeah, it's very high. So financial challenge is going to be there. The visa is going to be another challenge. I remember people who wanted to go to the Berlin campus, they were uncertain about the visa till 2 or 3 weeks before the flight. They hadn't gotten the visas, and visa is going to be accommodation is going to be one thing. A lot of people who are new don't know the language. They're likely to get scammed by people. They're probably likely to take bad deals. For instance, in my case, I rushed into finding a house and I got a. I mean, living 1 hour away and spending so much on public transport, I would say it's not the best of the deals. So that is going to be another other challenge and fitting into the cultural thing which I mentioned that, for instance, when you're in France, if you don't know the language,
Extrovert versus introvert.
the circles are tight. So if you want to get into that circle, you need to be you need to sort of give up on your hesitance. You should be okay with being rejected as well because a lot of times the groups are not going to accept you. You have to be okay with that. You have to be okay with the awkward silences that they just their own language and you just listening to something you don't understand. And it's just like continuous effort, finding people, finding experiences. It's the complete mindset is go get it. Nothing is going to come to you.
So having a clarity over your long-term objectives, finding a way of achieving it, achieving operational efficiency in the way you go about what do you call navigating through them,
Yeah,
and
yeah,
lastly being open to rejections and being the go-getter. That is
yeah,
something that most of the people need to keep in mind.
yeah.
So yeah, Arman, that was pretty much it with the episode on ESCP from Gatsby's Gyan. It was really wonderful getting to cover it as intricately as possible. Thank you so much for accepting the invitation.
Of course, it was a pleasure and it was really great. And I really love your work. And also, even I remember with DU when we had the Finjan. So getting to see the hints of Gatsby over there.
Probably, probably. So yeah, we'll
It's
call
been
it
a
a
long
day.
journey, yes.
Yep. So Arman, I'll be